This is lesson 5.5, standard form of a linear equation. We have learned slope, intercept, and point slope form so far. Today we are learning standard form. So wherever you see these green circles, ax plus by equals c, that's where we're going to have a number. So an example of standard form would look something like 3x plus 2y equals 6. So this is an example of what standard form is going to look like when you have numbers in. And those numbers are called coefficients. So looking at our first example, an athlete wants to make a snack mix of peanuts and cashews that will contain a certain amount of protein. Cashews have 4 grams of protein per ounce, and peanuts have 7 grams of protein per ounce. How many grams of protein will the athlete's mix contain? What do the points 7, 0, and 0, 4 represent? Explain. So let's look at our graph. The title of our graph is snack mix. Our x-axis has ounces of cashews, and our y-axis has ounces of peanuts. So x would stand for the number of ounces of cashews, and y stands for the number of ounces of peanuts. So if x is cashews, the point 7, 0 means 7 cashews and 0 grams of peanuts. The second ordered pair is going to mean 0 grams of cashews and 4 grams of peanuts. Looking at question number 2, given an ordered pair CP that falls on the line segment, what expression represents the grams of protein in the mix? So let's go back up to the question. Cashews have 4 grams of protein per ounce. So that means 4 grams of protein per ounce. So x is the number of cashews, ounces, so that times 4 would give us the number of grams. And then peanuts are worth 7 grams per ounce. That's going to be 7 times the number of ounces that you have. So this will be the expression that represents how many grams of protein we would have in our snack mix. The y-intercept of a graph is where the graph crosses the y-axis. So we don't have a vocab sheet, but here's a vocab word. The x-intercept is where it crosses the x-axis. So let's make a graph. So if this is a graph, I have an x-axis and I have a y-axis. So here's my x. So if it crosses the x-axis, that's called the x-intercept. If it is a y-intercept, then it would cross over here. And then what we can do is figure out what would be the equation of that line given that green x-intercept and the red y-intercept. So standard form of a linear equation. Ax plus by equals c, where a, b, and c are real numbers. Note, a, b, and c must be integers. Standard form is used to quickly graph x and y intercepts. So find the x and y intercepts. All y-intercepts have a value for x of 0, and all x-intercepts have a y value of 0. So if I were to draw a coordinate plane, so if I had a point here, and I had a point here, remember, this is my x-axis, this is my y-axis, this is where it crosses the y-axis, so the coordinate of that would be over 0 up some number, and then the coordinate for this purple point would be over some number up 0. So that's where we're getting our numbers here. All y-intercepts have an x value of 0, and all x-intercepts have a y value of 0. So to find your y-intercept, you plug 0 in for x. To find your x-intercept, you plug 0 in for y. So to review what we did on last slide, to find your x-intercept, you plug 0 in for y. To find your y-intercept, you plug 0 in for x. So what we're going to do is cover it up. So in question number 1, if I plug in 0 for y, 4 times 0 would be 0, so this goes away. So then 2 times what is 8? 4. So what I did was I plugged 0 in for y, So we get 2x minus 4 times 0 equals 8. And this is what we covered up because it cancels. And we get 2x equals 8. Divide by 2 and x equals 4. So that is the point 4. And then we plug 0 in for y. To find our other intercept, we're going to plug in 0 for x. So we get 2 times 0 minus 4y equals 8. So what we're doing is we're just going to cover up this part because that's going to give us 0. So this cancels and we get negative 4y equals 8. So y is equal to negative 2, and that would give us the coordinate x0. So here's our 0, and then y is negative 2. So here is our y-intercept, and here's our x-intercept, and here is our y-intercept. Let's try another one. So to find our x-intercept, we're plugging 0 in for y, so this is going to become a 0. So we get 5x minus 6 times 0 equals negative 60. And some of you might just be able to say, oh, that means this is going to become 0, so I cover that up, and I have 5x equals negative 60. So 5x equals negative 60, and remember, you need to show one step of work. So 5 is equal to negative 12. So then if we find our y-intercept, we're going to plug in 0 for x. So the 0 is going to go right here. So we have 5 times 0 minus 6y equals negative 60. And again, you can just cover that up because 5 times 0 is going to be 0. So then you're left with negative 6y equals negative 60. So again, this is what we covered up. So we get negative 6y equals negative 60. So y is going to be negative 10. So if we were to write coordinates for this, we plug 0 in for y. So we get negative 12, 0. We plug 0 in for x. So we get 0, negative 10. So those are coordinates on our graph. Try the last one. So pause the video here while they finish. So if we look at the solution, we're trying to find our x-intercept first. So I'm going to cover up the y, and I get 3x equals 12. So if I have 3x equals 12, that means I'm crossing this part out. So that's why I was covering it up. And I get 3x equals 12, so x is 4. If we write this as a coordinate, you plugged in 0 for y, and you got a 4 for x. In the orange, we were putting in 0 for x, so then we cover that part up, or here in the red, that's what it would look like. And we get 8y equals 12. So this part cancels. So then we divide by 8, and then we have to reduce our fraction. So we plugged in 0 for x, and you get 3 halves out for y. So that would be at a decimal. So because of standard form, what we can do is we can find our x and our y intercepts and then plot those 2 points and have our graph. Let's practice graphing. You can quickly graph an equation in standard form by finding its x and y intercepts. So let's figure out our x-intercept. So to find our x-intercept, we plug 0 in for y. To find our y-intercept, we plug 0 in for x. So here's our equation. So let's cover up. So if I plug in 0 for y, 3 times 0 is going to give us 0. So we get x is equal to 6. So I get x is equal to 6. So that means that we plugged in 0 for y and we got 6 out for x. Let's do the same thing for our y-intercept. So our y-intercept, we're going to plug in 0 for x, so that means this value is 0. So then I get negative 3y equals 6. Negative 3y equals 6. So we'll divide by negative 3, and y equals negative 2. So that is the coordinate 0 for x gives us the negative 2. So now we need to plot those points. So 0, negative 2, so over 0, down 2 happens there, and then over 6, up 0 happens here. So if we look at our labels, this is our x-axis, so that's our x-intercept. This is our y-axis, the purple is our y-intercept. So now we need to connect our dots. So this gives you a quick graph. You only need 2 points when you're looking at standard form. So to find those points, you can just cover up the y, you get x is 6, cover up the x, and you get a negative 2. So I'm just using the eraser to cover it up, because when I cover, I'm plugging in 0 and it cancels out. So I'll do the first one with you. It says graph each line using the x and y intercepts. So if I cover up the x, I get 2y equals 4, so y is equal to 2. If I cover up the y, if I cover up this part, I'm left with x equals 4. So x equals 4. So those coordinates, up here I plugged 0 in for x and I got a 2, and then down here I plugged 0 in for y and I used a 4. So plotting those points, so over 4, up 0, over 0, up 2, and then we go ahead and connect our dots. So again, when you're doing standard form, you only need 2 points. Try number 2. Please pause the video here. So if I cover up my y, I get negative 2x equals 20, so x is negative 10. And if I cover up my x, remember I'm just plugging in a 0, I get 5y equals 20, so y would be 4. So I need to plot those points. So y is equal to 4, and x is equal to negative 10. So that's 9, so it's off the graph just a little bit. And then we would connect our dots. So again, you just need to find your x and y intercepts and then plot your points. So vocab sheet, equations of horizontal lines. Remember, we just had that warm up today. Horizontal lines always look like y equals some number, and I'll call that number A. Vertical lines are always x equals, so they're going to be x equals some number. So the steps to graphing them. You need to determine whether it's going to be a horizontal or vertical line. Look at the variable. That variable is the axis at which you'll plot your point. Part C is plot the number or value on that axis. Part D, draw a vertical or horizontal line through that point. So graph the following equations. So pause the video here, give them some time to. So number 1, x equals negative 3, so that means every x value has to be negative 3. Number 2, x equals 4, so that means every x value has to be 4. Number 3, y equals negative 2, so that means every y value has to be negative 2. Number 4, y equals 9, every y value has to be equal to 9. Number 5, x equals 0. So every x value has to be equal to 0, so that's going to be your y-axis. And number 6, every y value has to be 0, so that's going to look like this. So this is a review of your warm-up from today. Use algebra to write equations in standard form. So here's our standard form. Put the equations in standard form. So when we're doing standard form, we need to get them in ax plus by equals c form. And remember, we have to have integers. So I need to get the x and the y on the same side, so I'm going to subtract. So I get negative 2x plus 3y equals negative 2. Double check to see that I have integer coefficients. -2, +3, -2. So this would be correct. Number 2, I need to get the x and the y on the same side, so I'm going to add. And I get 3/7 x plus y equals -4. Double check to see if I have integer coefficients. I do not. So I need to get rid of my denominator of 7, so what I'm going to do is multiply each term by 7. So when I multiply by 7, the 7's cancel and I'm left with a 3x, and this becomes 7 times y, and this becomes -28. So I had to get rid of this fraction, so I multiplied by the denominator, and now I'll have integer coefficients. On the last question, this looks like it's point-slope form, so I need to distribute first. Add 2. And then when I add 2, that makes 0, so I need to get this on the other side, so I'm going to add it. So I get 1/3 x plus y, and then I'm left with nothing on the other side. So I have to worry about integer coefficients again. Remember, I'm going to multiply by the denominator, so each thing I have to multiply by 3. So then I get x plus 3y, and then 3 times 0 is 0. So standard form always has to have integers. If you want to get rid of fractions, you need to multiply by the denominator. This concludes our lesson for today. Make sure you do your homework for tomorrow. I will take 5 questions.